Greetings and welcome to the Brockton Bay Chronicles. My name's Keith. With me as always is my good friend Andy. Andy is making his way through his first time reading of the web serial Worm by Wildbow. Hey Andy, what's up?
Not a lot. We're getting a little break from the heat here. Sorry for all those around the country who are still sweltering, but we only had a high of 74 the other day. So
Rub it in. Thanks.
Neener. Yeah. Today we'll be reviewing Arc 16, Monarch, chapters 8 through 10, and the final interlude. And as far as new business, we have some questions and comments.
Yes, we certainly do. And I'm going to start off with a reply from Tony. This has to do with the question that Ides of March had posed to us the previous episode about Wildbow possibly having a protagonist other than Taylor. And Tony was kind enough to send me a reply. So in part, this reads, I'm not sure how to respond to Ides of March's question since Wildbow addressed those choices directly in an interview. But when I was reading, I think Taylor was a great protagonist because she is able to give us so much information in the moment without the use of third-person perspectives or plot-driven information dumps outside of interludes. Taylor's sensing and perceiving from her bugs gives us so many perspectives and allows us to keep tabs on nearby characters and actions in such a way that she doesn't need to be unreliable in narration. Combining Taylor and Lisa gives us a kind of organic information delivery that doesn't kill the dialogue by needing the villains to always monologue and explain their dastardly plans. Lisa infers them, and Taylor literally eavesdrops to realistically give us this information. It's interesting that in Ward, Wildbow needed to lean into characters and interludes a lot more to give us the same type of information that we were accustomed to getting directly from protagonists in Worm. And that's from Tony. You want to comment on his statement there? You want to add anything to that, Andy?
Well, I think he makes a great point about how many more villainous monologues we would have had to wade through if we hadn't had that kind of back channel of the bugs and Lisa's inference power. So that's a great point. I hadn't really thought of it that way, but picturing the different chapters and everything, it's like, oh my gosh, yeah, it would have been like watching, old Batman. The Penguin had to tell us every time what was happening because Batman and Robin never knew. So yeah, I like this. And it's pretty much what we said, that we like Taylor as the protagonist. So
yeah, agreed. Next up, we hear from Chrysalis. Pigou is an interesting character. Sure, she's easy to dislike, both because of her blatant ruthlessness and willingness to put people, particularly parahumans, but not exclusively so, in harm's way for the, quote, greater good, which is always the convenient excuse of someone who is abusing their power, and because she is the direct adversary of our main characters. But her perspective is also understandable from the trauma she's gone through. Seeing herself as the sane one, quote unquote, of course, she wouldn't mind putting the capes in harm's way. If they defeat the villain, great. And even if they suffer casualties in the process, from her point of view, it's less capes to worry about. What is worrying is that not only is she in a position of power in the PRT, she is probably there because of that anti-cape, ruthless, brutal outlook, which is not a great look for the PRT and is very worrying about the entire organization if they are actively promoting that kind of behavior and having them directly directing teams of not only adult capes, but the kids. We don't see it too much, but one of the worst things about Pigou is knowing she's basically in charge of the wards. It says a lot about the PRT that they have promoted her there. Also, shout out to Imp, who's proving her worth once again. Love this character. A lot there to unpack from Chrysalis. What do you have to say about that?
As I've mentioned before, I'm kind of a goody two-shoes, so I have trouble giving people a pass. I recognize that there's a wide spectrum of how people approach things, And so there's going to be good and evil in everybody, and some people are going to be tilted more one way than the other. But I think it's a good perspective about Piggo being in charge of the wards. I hadn't really considered that
I
before,
hadn't
but
either.
kind of reminds me of, and I can't remember the character's name in the movie, but Harrison Ford's character in Ender's Game, where he was just willing to push those kids through the meat grinder because he felt like it was an existential threat, and it was. But that's probably the only movie where I really have disliked the person that Harrison Ford is playing. And it was precisely because of the ruthlessness and his willingness to just, let stuff seemingly go out of control. And in that book, it was neat, and the movie, the way they had other people to kind of rein him in and to
Mm-hmm.
try to balance it out. And every once in a while there'd be like a human emotion type moment, and same with Piggo. But they say absolute power corrupts absolutely, and
Right.
she's got that super high level of control. But yeah, it's almost like she's got some kind of, well, there shouldn't be more than X number of capes around, and so we're getting over that limit now. So
Mm-hmm.
all right, yeah, I'll come up with a plan that's pretty risky, and maybe a few of them will get taken out. That's not a bad thing. It's like, dang, all right, that's nobody wants a boss like that.
No, not at all. It's an interesting take. That's a good perspective that I had not considered at all, especially as you were mentioning her being in charge of the wards like that as well. Interesting.
Hmm.
And we hear again from Johannes E. And this is with regards to Dinah being related to the mayor and Triumph. And Johannes says, I'm pretty sure it's specifically mentioned in the news that the mayor's niece was kidnapped, though she's not named, if I recall correctly. So you just have to put two and two together. So the information is there. It's not a spoiler, but it's one mentioned a lot earlier in the story, hard to keep track of. And that's true. I think we had a pretty good chuckle on that about the wealth of information that we got to wade
Oh my
through
gosh.
and dig through our senior memories to try to recall. So
Yeah, and we're going to run into that on this podcast as well. I think as we get into the interlude. So
oh yeah, so much there, so much there.
yeah,
We hear now from James Goddard. What a brutal cliffhanger. Was that on purpose? Well, with the Undersiders now sitting as the de facto leaders front side of the villains, what do you think the city and the heroes should do? They defeated the Slaughterhouse Nine with no losses and thwarted one of the strongest Tinker's attempt at combating them in a day. Good question from James here. I think I kind of touched tangentially on that issue about the strength of the Undersiders and how what they've gone through, and how now the PRT at large is going to have to show a little more respect and concern about the Undersiders. What do you think about James's comment?
I like the comment a lot, but after reading this next section, if I put that aside, then yeah, I would think the Undersiders would have to almost, if they were to continue to kind of consolidate their power and try to control the city as things, try to get rebuilt and everything, they would have to kind of take a step back, right? And they would have to have more lieutenants that were kind of doing their work for them, and still be doing jobs for Coyle and that kind of thing, but not as highly visible, because yeah, then the Protectorate's going to have to just stop them. It's going to be a continual slap in the face for them. So I think it would be really interesting story, and see how that went if it had gone that way. as we will see, it's just another one of those rug pull things coming up here, and
Big time.
and it's like, holy Toledo, just when you think you can sit down and have a Butterfinger candy bar, then nope, slapped out of your hand, and something bad happens.
that's worm for you. Yep.
Yeah.
And finally, we hear from Vale. I feel for you having to wait before continuing on as you progress through review episodes. I don't think I could have done it. My first read, I took sick days at work because I couldn't/wouldn't stop reading. There's an obvious hidden benefit, though, at least for me. If I had been forced to stop and review a few chapters at a time, I would not have skimmed and rushed reading entire sections to get to the conclusion after each cliffhanger, only to progress to the next. As enjoyable as that was, doing a closer read has tons of merit, but I empathize with the desire to go fast. That said, it will be funny if the time between each review episode decreases until you get to the point of doing 3 a week. Well, Vale, I definitely relate to the going through and continuing on through sections you should want to stop and revisit. I think I mentioned this early on in the podcast. My initial plan was after when I was listening to the audio and I got through Arc 8, got through the Leviathan arc, and I was like, you know what, I should really start back at Arc 5 and pick up stuff that I missed. And that never happened, and I ended up charging through. I think there's whole segments of this arc, and I think 17 and into 18 where I really should have doubled back, but I couldn't stop. I mean, yeah, I'm listening to the audio driving to and from work and maybe a little bit at home, but yeah, I should have revisited stuff, but I couldn't. I just couldn't. How are you holding up? I know it's killing you having to stop at these cliffhangers.
It's really tough, I have to admit. And I can relate to Vale's comment. I don't know that I ever took a sick day, but I know back in the day reading books, there were days where I was just like one more chapter, and then I'd look up at like 3 o'clock in the morning, and then I'd get 4 hours of sleep and drag my sorry up behind into work. So I've definitely been through that, and I can totally picture just like, all right, I caught 3 words out of that paragraph, but I didn't say anything about whether the sword actually penetrated the armor or not. So I'll keep going. So you do miss stuff, but it's just you're just compelled almost to rush through at times. And I almost picture you, since you did it as an audiobook, like taking extra laps around the neighborhood on the way home from work or something, and your wife saying, "Where were you? Did you get the milk?" Oh,
right.
I got to go back out. Sorry, and then boom, you're right back on again. But yeah, as I've aged, I'm able to kind of slow down a little bit with the reading, and I'm a really bad at reading multiple books at the same time. So I'm reading a series that I got on my Kindle, and then I've got another book in a series called The Culture that I'm reading, and then I'm doing a book for work, and I'm doing a book for my other hobbies. So,
see, I can't really do that. I can't do that. You remember that copy of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy you got me for Christmas once? That beautiful leather bound. I picked that thing up 2 months ago, intending to read that during our downtime, and I can't. I just, because I'm prepping for our what we're doing here and stuff. But whereas you can consume books, in huge quantities, I got to stay a little more focused because I don't, ADD or something. I don't know, dude. I can't do that. But
well, I think that we're all on a different place with that ability, just like anything else. But you are a extremely detail oriented person, and so even back in the day when we were doing computer programming together, you'd be like, well, why does this happen? Why does that happen? What's this going on here? What's this? Why did you choose that? And I'm just like, just roll with it. It works. Okay. I got to go work on a different language now. And you're like, what? And so, I think I just I've got that kind of thing. And I think it came up from when I was a kid, and you just, reading some of the old ones like Tolkien, and you get to parts where it's just kind of, the story's just dragging, it's like, all right, they're riding, they're walking to Mordor. Great. All right. That's going to be the next 40 pages or whatever. And so it's like, all right, I'll see if I can find something else that's a little more interesting. So it's like you're always watching the action part of the movies and skipping over the romance or dialogue or whatever. It's like,
Gotcha.
I don't care. So I think I just am able to kind of compartmentalize, but that's helped me survive the lag time between episodes. But yeah, maybe we can speed it up a little bit, but I can't do 3 a week. That's just
Yeah, that's
I
bananas.
appreciate the sentiment and the part of me that wants to get through this,
Uh-huh.
and see what happens. I definitely appreciate that, but yeah, I don't think I keep up that pace.
Well, thank you everyone, as always, for the questions and comments. We love hearing from you every episode. So thank you, and please keep them coming. And now with that, we will move on to our review, starting off with Arc 16, Chapter 8. And we're at the mayoral debate. Things are just getting ready to get started. The candidates are up on the stage. They're getting ready to take the microphone to start debating. Imagine yourself as Taylor right now, and your bugs are telling you what's going on in the lobby. You're sitting there next to your dad. The people are up on the stage, and your supervillain boss is out there about to come striding into the auditorium. Wildbow does a pretty good job setting the scene for us there and ratcheting up the tension using Taylor's bugs, as much as something that Tony pointed to, using Taylor's bugs to set the stage for us.
I really liked how this unfolded and kind of the suspense where Taylor's questioning, well, maybe he's here just to monitor the situation, what's going on. And then he starts rounding people up in the lobby to make sure they don't squeal or let the cat out of the bag. And then she's kind of thinking, all right, no, this is not good. Something's going down. She's really caught because she's there as Taylor and she's on Coyle's team, sort of. So it's like, well, what happens if things start going down? I want to protect my dad, but I also want to make sure Coyle falls through on his deal. And it's like, well, how do you know what's going to help the most in making that happen? So it's very tense, even though it's not a knife in her throat or the miasma or anything like that. It's really cool the way Wildbow makes it, the tension almost as palpable with somebody just sitting in an auditorium.
Yeah, sometimes the hardest thing to do, even though it may be the wisest, is to sit there and do nothing. There was no way that I could see that if she intercedes, there's no way that she doesn't get outed. Do you think that would have been possible if she brought a swarm down? I mean, as Wildbow lays out in the writing, if she'd have brought a swarm down, then after the event, they'd be looking for someone who fits Skitter's physique, and they'd hone in on her, I would think.
Yeah, it would have been really hard, if she had seen maybe other people that were similar to her in build and complexion and looks, then maybe, okay, it could have been any of us or whatever, or I don't know, but it would have been really hard. And so, yeah, that didn't seem like a viable option. If she had had like a giant swarm that she could have packed the lobby with or something, where Coyle was the only one that really saw it in his cronies, then obviously he would have known that she was against him, but nobody else would have. But that would have been a really bad situation for her to be in too. So there was just, yeah, she was really caught in a bad spot.
Yeah, not much you could do, and things just kind of unfolded, and the mayor kind of hurried and gruff. He was getting his hat handed to him in the debate, it sounded like, but not delving into the politics of that. Well, maybe a little bit, because as we learn later, the two other people in the debate were Coyle lackeys. So yeah, the mayor, he had to be taken out in order for Coyle's plan to come to fruition. And no matter what happened, Coyle had it set that one of his people was going to be there to take over the job. Circus. Wow. pretty dangerous individual. I believe the last time we saw Circus, she was using a sledgehammer. Oh, right. Wow. Gosh. A lifetime ago, she was sledgehammering Arms Master in the parking lot underneath that after the attack on the banquet. And now here she is skillfully, easily slinging blades at the mayoral candidates and Pigou.
Coyle has set the stage pretty well by making sure everybody who could be there or all the expected players are otherwise occupied. But yeah, Circus has some pretty amazing abilities and definitely come in handy, no pun intended, where she's throwing these knives around. And I even like the way Wildbow described that, with these kind of trick shots she's doing to be able to get to people when they're still trying to hide or run away and stuff. And so pretty impressive, definitely.
Right. Let me read this one section when Circus throws these knives at Pigou, and it says, Pigou backed away from the table and ducked low. It didn't help. Circus lobbed a throwing knife into the air so that it arced. She didn't have eyes on the director, but the knife nonetheless went high, catching the light as it reached the peak of its flight near the high ceiling of the auditorium. It plunged down to strike its target, and screams sounded from the auditorium. He gives us that paragraph there, and then the earlier section gives similar description of the flight of the knives as they hit the other candidates. Pretty chilling, laying out that sequence of events, I thought.
Yeah, and just a couple paragraphs down, Circus isn't sure she hit anything vital, and so she throws three more. And the way he writes it is their paths are eerily in sync as they nearly touch the ceiling, converging together as they drop towards Pigou. It's like when you see NCAA tournament or something and somebody takes one of those shots and it's like, is that going to hit the backboard? Or,
right.
Is that, and it just skims over and somehow goes where it's supposed to go. It's amazing when people have that kind of ability.
Yeah, and it's the equivalent of a Magic Johnson no-look bounce pass to James Worthy or something like that.
Pretty much, yeah.
The wards show up. This is a pretty chaotic scene, and I got a little turned sideways. So the wards show up, and I'm trying to figure out, were they there? Well, obviously, they took the opportunity to take out Chariot because everybody knew Chariot was a double agent. They were not there on purpose. Were they? Were they as a response to the attack? Because I think Uber said that the wards were on their way or something like that, or they had been distracted. I forget the pace of the conversation.
Uber did mention, Leet said someone contacted the heroes. My UI says they're on the way. So, I'm guessing Pigou had a panic button or something, and
okay,
she probably just triggered the word signal or whatever, the giant W in the sky.
Gotcha.
And then they limped their way over there. I mean, they're not in fighting fit form. They're a little bit beat up and ragged. And I'm guessing that at some point there might have kind of, as they were talking about, hey, there's a traitor in the midst. How could we deal with that? That maybe they had kind of come up with a plan, or a couple of them had come up with a plan. And it just was kind of coincidental maybe that it happened with Coyle being there. But they figured that would be any time. If Chariot was going to just out, that was going to be when Coyle was there, to definitely switch sides in front of everybody. And so they decided to try to take him out of the equation while combating Coyle. And that was a pretty good strategy, I think.
Yeah, I can see them having a get Chariot plan on standby. And if the situation was dire enough and it's presented itself, okay, now we do this. So yeah, I can see that happening. So yeah, Coyle has among his parahumans, we've got Circus, Uber, and Leet. One of them's wearing a big metal suit, standing in for Trainwreck, who we know got taken out in the attack on the merchants a few arcs ago. Taylor and her dad try to keep their heads down. The wards seem to get the upper hand of the situation. And then there's an explosion. One of the power supplies goes south. There's a crush of human beings trying to escape as someone yells out a warning. Taylor ends up getting blinded. She gets her face burned a little bit and her eyes are damaged. And all she can see is white. And that moves us on into the next chapter, chapter 9. We pick up with Taylor having been knocked down, her dad knocked down, injuries, and she can't see. Pretty scary situation there for a moment for the kid, huh?
Well, yeah, I think for anybody who was without powers, it would have been totally debilitating.
Oh yeah, hysterics. Oh yeah,
exactly. Yeah, but she knows she's still got these outlying sensors, if you will, that can bring in some information.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not great, but she can work with it. So she's trying to stay calm and realizing that things have really taken a bizarre turn and she's lost her sight in the whole process. So it's kind of like, well, what I have to make sure people are okay. That's all I can do right now.
Vintage Taylor, right?
Right.
Getting in the middle of a catastrophe. Once she reaches around, sees she's got all her extremities in place and no gushing wounds, her first thought is to see what she can do to go help people.
Exactly. Yep.
Fortunately, her father, he's injured, but he's okay. He's knocked out. He's not dead. That's good. His dad's friends nearby, I believe Lacey is the one who came to consciousness next and was trying to convince Taylor not to go and move because of possible injuries. Like, hey, just kind of stay here and we'll wait for help to come. Meanwhile, Taylor's like, no, I've got to go help people. She has what few bugs she had available to her, sweeping across the damaged area out in the entrance to the auditorium, and it sounds like there's nothing but death and body parts out there. And so she goes up to the stage and makes her way up there to go try to help the mayor, being as discreet as she can with her bugs. That's just kind of who she is in a situation like this, as I said earlier.
Well, and something that didn't occur to me right away was that, yeah, she's definitely trying to help people, but the mayor is part of Dinah's family. And that was one of her main goals, was rescuing Dinah. So she doesn't want to have Dinah to come back and have her uncle be dead on top of everything. But yeah, she's trying to take care of him and trying, as you said, draping her hair over so that people can't see bugs crawling over the poor guy and think that maybe something else is going on.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, she's, like you said, just trying to be the battlefield medic who's wounded in the process, but still trying to help other people. So
she's very angry at Coyle. She curses him. As far as she knows, he did this on purpose. Before her sight was damaged, she had flashes of the explosion, and she saw the person. Here we go. This quote right here from Wildbow. He writes, "Yes, I had seen, quote, Coyle die. I had little doubt others had as well. Even news cameras would have had eyes on the scene." So Coyle to the world is dead, but she's thinking that he staged this. He's so close to his grand plan. She doesn't have all the answers, but she does do the math in her head, and it's like, this is obviously staged, but to what end? Meanwhile, she's just like, I'm gonna get you. This is wrong. This is a bridge too far. I'm gonna get you.
The whole problem Taylor's had with kind of going down the villain path is that she doesn't want to kill people. You know, she's tried to really avoid doing that as much as she can. It doesn't compute for her, right? That's just not a good thing. And so and that's part of the reason she was kind of okay with going along with Coyle, was that he had this succession plan. He was going to put his puppet mayor in place, control things from behind the scenes. And it's like, all right, that's not great, but it's not assassinating the mayor or finding some horrible way of doing things. But then he goes and does this. Yeah, I think part of the reason she puts some of this stuff together right away is the same thing we were thinking about, was that once you become too famous as a villain, you can't really operate anymore. You're going to be public enemy number one. And so it's kind of like, oh, why would this happen? Oh, so he could go underground. Everybody thinks, well, he can't be doing this anymore because he died. He
Right.
can't be Coil. But yeah, to have so much collateral damage and to have obviously orchestrated all this to such a large degree, I'd be pretty mad too if I were Taylor.
The paramedics and other first responders arrive and begin tending to the wounded, including her dad's friends, and the mayor. Someone comes up to help her and take over his care, and she tells that person that she can't see. We go through a lot of this chapter where it's her in her own head and thinking about the idea of having lost her vision and what to do next, running through what it was that Coil may have been up to in this faux
staging his own death.
Thank you. Yeah, there you go. Exactly. So after a little while, she and everyone else gets taken to the hospital, and she notes the irony of her returning to that same hospital, but this time not as a wounded supervillain, but as Taylor. She's in a curtained off area. There's no tension. There's no tags on the doors. No one's being brought in by PRT officers or guarded by PRT officers. It's just people given care. Different situation from the first time she was at that hospital.
That's got to be such a weird feeling. You kind of have flashbacks, but you're a civilian instead of a cape. You're, as you said, you're not under any kind of excess scrutiny. You're not handcuffed.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to really take care of you. Yeah, it's a lot different. The one other thing though is that because it was an Endbringer attack, there was this understanding that people would get healed. Anybody that tried to fight, good or bad, they would try to heal them through the people who had healing powers.
Right.
And so now we don't necessarily have that. We don't even know who's around. And so I was a little surprised that she wasn't more concerned about that. I mean, we'll get into it here in a minute as we go deeper into the chapter, but I would think there'd be a little, oh man, yeah, who's going to be doing that work? Is anybody going to be doing that? Or is it going to be, hey, you're just a civilian, so you just get, pick some stuff out of your skin, rub some ointment on it, and then, try to make an appointment with an optometrist or ophthalmologist and come back in a month and a half and, get in line with everybody else.
Yeah, you said saying that makes me think back to something in the previous chapter. One of the candidates said, what was it, like half the population of Brockton Bay has split now, or 40%, some huge number, huh?
Yeah, you're right. A bunch of people have left because, the infrastructure is pretty much collapsed. They were talking about how people are having to try to get news any way they can, and people were showing up to the debate because you couldn't watch it on TV.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's been a mass exodus. So anybody who's there is looking at a long time to wait to get any kind of help.
Yeah.
And not being a parahuman, you're in the big line with everybody else, not in the short line.
Right. So stepping back and looking at Brockton Bay as a character, and I think I may be repeating myself. I think I brought this up last episode also about how much that town has been through. And if you look at it as a character, it is pretty beat down.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And, you see a lot of towns go through things, even in real life, and you get like Boston Strong or whatever when they were dealing
Sure.
with the Boston Marathon bombing a few years ago and those kind of things. But that's just a drop in the bucket compared to what Brockton Bay has gone through. And so, I mean, I'm spoiled. I've done remote work now for quite a while, and so like, yeah, I just move. I don't care, you know, if I
Hmm.
gotta just live out in a cheap bungalow in the wilderness for a while, but I would go someplace where there was running water and there weren't criminals controlling neighborhoods and stuff. But tons of people don't have that option. Especially people who've lost family members. Maybe it was the person who was bringing in the money or whatever, and so,
Hmm.
or maybe their business was devastated by it. But yeah, anybody who could leave, I think, has left.
Probably packed up and left, and so the folks who were sticking in there, some of them are probably just kind of trapped. Not unlike, let me see, was it Charlotte? I think can't move because of one of her relatives. I think it is, but
That
anyway,
sounds right. Yeah.
anyway. So while she's waiting there, examining her situation, Lisa comes and they do their exchange of code to make sure everything is cool. And Lisa, her power right away tells her that Taylor is blind. And she's like, hey, well, that sucks. And the two of them talk about the situation. Lisa's like, hey, we can get you a healer, we can hire somebody, or we can use Regent to control them, or have Gru siphon off their power to heal you up. And Taylor points out that, well, nobody's going to want to come here and work for us for those very reasons. The kind of things that make us strong are reasons why people wouldn't want to come hang out with us, and that would be the forcing them to bend to our will so that we could use their power. They've got a rep now.
Mm,
They're not wiping out hospital nurseries, but the Undersiders have got a pretty strong rep now.
that's a great point. And if you're on the side of good versus evil, then yeah, there's no benefit to you helping anyone on
Right.
the Undersiders. It's like, oh, well, I'm glad you're blind. That's one less person I got to worry about. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's not a good situation at all.
Lisa points out that yes, Coil, she confirms Coil is alive. So, there's a whole thing there. And points out that there were not as many people injured or killed in the explosion as Taylor may have thought to be the case. Taylor asks her about her dad. Lisa gives her the lowdown on that and brings up the fact that now might be a time to go and see Coil. And then we go through this whole thing where oh man, I mean,
Hmm.
she rationalizes the leaving of her father to go get Dinah, to go talk to Coil, to try to catch him in a good mood, for lack of a better way to put this, and say, hey, remember that whole deal with Dinah? Maybe now, since your grand plan seems to be working, maybe you ought to let her go now. Disappointment from my part once again, where she's leaving her father. I'm just having trouble dealing with that.
I didn't when I read through it. I totally got the thinking behind it, but now that you bring it up, I agree with that. I mean, I think if Taylor had gone to see her dad, he would have kind of freaked out that she was blind.
You know what?
And
Let me interrupt real quick while I'm thinking about this. I want to ask the listeners. I mean, so you and I are looking at this story as a couple of fathers, and I know
mm,
that we both know that the story was, the audience is skewed younger. Um,
mhm.
I would wonder if folks think maybe I'm being unnecessarily critical because I'm looking at this through dad blinders, and the idea of her, in my mind's eye, abandoning her father again. So that's a question I just want to toss out to anybody who may want to respond to that in the comments. So sorry about that. Go ahead and then finish your point.
Well, actually, I'm going to piggyback on what you said because I think perspective does play a big part in this. I'm trying to think back to when I was younger, and I'm also thinking of my son, and there have been occasions where I didn't share things, or I didn't bring up the fact that something had happened because I knew that was just going to worry my parents.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't that big a deal. We both played sports. We both had injuries,
Sure.
and it's kind of like, all right, well, I can't turn my head at all today, but it'll probably be fine.
Mm-hmm.
I could go to the doctor. I'm an adult now. I can take care of this. If I just tell my mom she's 1,000 miles away, she's going to freak out. She might get on a plane. Who knows,
Yeah.
And so I'll tell her when I'm feeling better, And so trying to picture Taylor with her eyes blinded and her face burned, going and talking to her dad, she might never get out of there.
That's true.
He might say, all right, no, you're obviously not thinking clearly. He might try to make sure that she's stuck in a hospital for a couple of days. And so I think you're right in that a younger perspective would be, I got this. I'm not, I'm operating. I'm okay. And I know my dad's okay, and I'll come back when I'm feeling better, and then he won't freak out. But from a parent standpoint, we just had a thing with our son a little bit ago where he did something and didn't really tell us about it. It wasn't a bad thing at all, but it was a little risky in a good way. And yeah, I had to talk my wife down a little bit, and tell her, you know what, he's a grown man now, and he's making his decisions, and he was there, we weren't. Let's not go worst case scenario on this. He probably had a much better feel for what was going on. And so, but yeah, as a parent, I agree with where you're coming from, that you would hope your kid would let you know what's going on, and that, but again, she's only 16 years old, right? And
yeah,
and so as a dad, it'd be like, no, lay down on the bed.
He would totally at that point pull the she's just a minor card, and hospital personnel, please keep my daughter here.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's probably why she skated, but it doesn't make it any easier to swallow as a parent.
No, certainly not. Lisa shares with Taylor that the conversation she had with Danny about how if Taylor wasn't there, she was going to take her to her dad's clinic, blah, blah, blah. She also shared that Danny doesn't like her much anymore, and Taylor, rightly so, deduces that, it's easier to blame you for me not being home rather than blaming me. The two young ladies take off. Lisa gives her a hand, and they head on down to the car, and Lisa brings her up to speed on the situation as it stood. Cool description of how Taylor uses some spiders under the stairwell and some flies under the stairs as well, placed on the stairs to help her get her footing as they head out the door. Also, like when Lisa had first come into her room, she placed a mosquito between her shoulder blades so she could follow her. Again, all this incredible multitasking going on in Skitter's brain. Oh yeah, let's not forget when Lisa said the part about she had thought about suggesting Taylor do something like this, blindfolded but not blind, so to speak, in order to force her brain to try to access those areas, that data that the bugs are sending her. Good idea. We're here now, not on purpose, but she's kind of here now.
Yeah. Lisa says, it's funny. And Taylor says, it's not that funny.
No, not at all.
I'm the blind person now. I'm not laughing.
Yeah, I'm not getting a kick out of this. But anyway, moving a little further on into the chapter, as they get in the car and Lisa gets ready, fires it up, she puts a tape in. And it's a news report talking about what happened at the attack at the debate, and lays out the explosion and the assassination attempt from a local supervillain, blah, blah, blah. Pigot's been told to stand down, and the local PRT have a new commander, a new leader, Commander Thomas Calvert. Did you recognize that name when you heard it or you read it?
I recognized that, just that I'd seen that name before. I couldn't connect it, but Calvert really stood out to me. So I was like, man, all right, where was that guy from? But
Do you remember? Because I can tell you.
no, I don't remember. But I thought they mentioned it in the next chapter.
Remember the arc for Pigot when she was on that team?
That's right.
He was the only other person on that team to get
That
away.
survived. Yeah, but he was busted.
Yeah, because he
And
shot
so
his
that's
captain.
why he was just a consultant. Okay.
Well, nah, think about it. Remember when he told her that he didn't trigger and I'm betting that's when he did trigger.
Oh.
And you know what?
Oh.
I may get fried in the comments for something that I should know. As I'm thinking this through, I can't tell you this. I may be I think I should have known this. But anyway, I think Calvert triggered then.
That would make sense.
And so yeah, because they were in the middle of that town, and Nilbog's horrific creations were coming to get him. So
I almost triggered just reading about Nilbog. So yeah, I can that thing creeped me out, man.
No
Oh
doubt.
boy. I was having visions of the movie The Thing.
Yeah.
And, oh man.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Yeah. So that brings us to the end of this chapter, and we find out that Thomas Calvert is Coil. And moving into chapter 10, Skitter and the team are at Coil's base. Skitter goes for a walk downstairs and runs into the travelers. On her way down there, she's got swarms of bugs sweeping over the area and assessing the situation, and she's noting how vacant the headquarters is. It's completely empty. A few doors being closed and that she can't get her swarm into, but she's taking a stroll around the place and runs into the travelers. And this was an incredibly tense situation. You have Trickster, who just kind of lays it all out there. He's got no love for Skitter. He's got no love for Coil. And he's all about two things that have to do with his team. As he put it, I believe it was, Coil's plans only mattered to him in so much as how it helped Coil help them. So, we ain't friends, Skitter. Don't even come down here and try to pretend that we are.
I gotta go back for a second here.
Sure.
So Lisa pretty much flat out told Taylor that Coil wasn't going to be at his base. So why did they go there?
Oh, that's a good question. Should we know that? Yeah, they were gonna.
Was she thinking maybe Dinah was still there and she could just
Lisa,
rescue her?
She would know. Why would they be there just to kill time before the meeting? Is it maybe it's mentioned later on somewhere down here in the text? Boy, yeah, okay, maybe we missed a point there. Maybe somebody can point that out to us in the comments there.
Okay.
So Skitter tries to read the situation. She's trying to be agreeable as best as she can to say, hey, no problem, I get it, we ain't friends, but hey, do you want to come with us to go meet with Coil? And Ballistic and Trickster are both like, Coil's dead, and you could be taping this and you may want to get me to say something that alludes to the fact that he's not dead, so leave us alone, go away. We were and then that whole thing about what Coil has to offer them. I mean, I get Skitter trying to offer the olive branch and make the best of the situation, but Trickster isn't having any of it. Ballistic obviously feels rightfully burned about that whole thing with Parian. A little more naivete from Skitter in a situation where people are trying to keep it real and she's trying to be a little pie in the sky, or no?
I could see that being naivete. And I wonder how much of it is just, I don't know if maybe envy is the right word, or just they're leery of the undersiders, but it was pretty much the undersiders that took care of business in a lot of ways. And, the travelers contributed to that. Different folks contributed to it, but at the end of the day, it's kind of like when Superman's talking to some of the other heroes in the DC universe. It's like, well, we can't really be friends because you're Superman, and I got to deal with all this stuff that, like, maybe I get shot. You don't have to worry about that, so just go away. It's
Yeah.
you're annoying. But I don't know if that's part of the dynamic here or not. But I thought it was interesting that Skitter was picking up that a lot of this was just trickster. That not everybody
Mm-hmm.
was fully on board with this. And in fact, Genesis just says he's tense, he's having trouble with things, and she's kind of like, don't take this the wrong way. I hope we never see you again.
Yeah, they've got a mission. They've got a couple of important items that they've got to deal with. So the travelers are on a whole nother task entirely. And I hope you guys didn't hear that. That was somebody going up the street on a motorcycle, rather loud one. Anyway, Skitter recalled something that Cherish had said when they had her held captive about Trickster, and I believe it was something about how everyone held him responsible or something like that. But that was just a passing recollection in Skitter's mind. Do you remember that little section of commentary from her?
Yeah, and also when she had talked to Sundancer and Ballistic, it mentions that here and how people had given off this thing where their team just had a different vibe. It wasn't like, hey, we're all in this together, let's try to get stuff done. There was this kind of, it sucks that we're in this, and we kind of maybe blame Trickster, but he's a leader, so we got to hope he's going to get us out of it. Yeah, I remember that coming through as kind of a vibe. There were hints
Mm-hmm.
that not all was lovey-dovey in the Travelers.
Yeah, let me read this one section. As pardon me, as Skitter's thinking about this, it says, "Funny, as I thought on it, how easily he seemed to slip between talking about I, as in himself, to talking about we, the group. It was as if he assumed everyone in the Travelers was on the same page as him. And my discussions with Sundancer and Ballistics had suggested anything but. Even Cherish's taunts had pointed to some strife within the ranks. So we've got an outline of something. There's disharmony for some reason going on in the Travelers, and that sparked a memory from Taylor. And like you said, as the Travelers head on around to their apartments inside the base, Genesis stops and offers a cordial thanks, but we got to go and we don't want to see you again. Sounds like if they get what they want, they won't see the Undersiders ever again. So
Right.
So they move on. We move on a little bit further into the chapter, and it gets to. Pardon me. Go ahead. You were going to say.
Well, yeah, just that very next paragraph is kind of what I was looking for, I guess. And it talks about Taylor saying the second piece of data I gleaned from my detour to the base was that Dina wasn't here.
Okay.
So I guess she decided, hey, let's go there and try to pick up some info. Even though in the previous chapter, they were kind of saying it's kind of imperative we get to Coil as quickly as possible. I guess they decided let's for sure rule out that he isn't there and that Dinah isn't there. So I guess that's why they made the detour.
Okay. Yeah, that clears that up then. They head off to meet with the director and his PRT squad. The Undersiders head up on top of a building. And yeah, Imp. Classic Imp sitting on the edge of the building, got her big brother, a nervous wreck seeing her sitting there like that. Skitter's like, you really probably shouldn't be there. They could have snipers, and Imp's like, oh, I thought you said these were bulletproof. Imp is more, she's more than comic relief, but her barbs they can be biting and a little humorous at times.
Well, and the thing is, we've all seen those movies where some of those sniper rifles are, 50 caliber or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
There's a wall of a tank isn't going to stop that. So I don't know how some spider silk can be It stopped the bullet. It didn't penetrate the spider silk. It just pushed the spider silk all the way through and out your back.
Right.
So
See,
sorry about that.
she's 14. She ain't even thinking about that. So
Exactly. Yeah.
Skitter uses her bugs to construct some spider silk rope and as a last ditch emergency possible evacuation plan. How did you like Regent talking to Skitter? I don't know, a little more supportive, a little more I don't know, I wouldn't say respectful, but acknowledging. I think there's a shift in how people talk to her as the leader of the Undersiders. Yeah.
I think so. That's a good point. I hadn't really thought about that, but trying to put myself in their place, it's like, yeah, all right, she's kind of just annoying. All right, yeah, she's trying to always say we should do this, and she's kind of always coming up with these risky ideas and stuff. And then, hey, you know what? She's been doing okay, and now she's blind, and
Mm-hmm.
she's still operating pretty good. If I was blind, I wouldn't be up and around. So okay, yeah, props to her. We'll cut her some slack, give her a little bit of deference, and
Yeah, deference. I think that's a good way to look at it. I mean, they're
yeah,
bowing and scraping before her, but there's a kind of a shift in the I think it's there in how the
I
others relate to her.
I'd agree to that. Yeah, definitely.
Thomas Calvert and his PRT squad gets there. This whole thing. Obviously, as we said earlier, the explosion was staged, and he goes through how he had set things up to make sure that, oh yeah, they constructed a teleportation device. And we get a little bit of a monologue about how he successfully swapped people out and that all the reporters were people on his payroll essentially, and obviously the two mayoral candidates were on his payroll, and the whole dynamic of the election was going to shift this way so that I could become the new PRT guy, blah blah blah. Kind of an information dump. Did you like that?
Yeah, I did.
I mean, I guess it was necessary to advance the story, to fill in the gaps for us.
Right. Yeah, and also, as we'll see here in a little bit, things take another whack the candy bar out of your hand type twist. But this kind of eases everybody's. It's almost like gives them a false sense of security. Hey, he's sharing all his info. He's letting us know. All right, so his plan has culminated, right? He got to where he wanted. So, all right, now we can, yeah, you take your bag of money, we'll take our bag of money and Dinah, and we'll walk our separate ways. And cool, the end.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think it seems a little bit, yeah, monologue-ish, if you will, but I think it was a great way, and it makes sense that kind of the chess master would try to put everybody at ease.
Yeah.
Before it's like, wait a minute, you already dropped two shoes. Where did the third shoe come from?
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, as we're talking and I'm thinking about it, sharing the plan with everyone, what happened and the go forward where they were going to go with the Undersiders, that would have the benefit of giving them that false sense of security and putting them more at ease to a certain extent. Okay, he's got a plan for the future. This is our role in it. We can dial our concern down from 11 to maybe 9.5 or something like that. So yeah, that I get it. That makes sense. He tries a last minute bargain with Skitter as they're talking about the release of Dinah, and offers up some concessions to her. Says, hey, let me have her for one more year. And this particular mayor candidate is going to make sure this thing gets done. And I can make sure that you have veto power on what does and doesn't happen in the North End. And I can restart your dad's ferry project and stuff. And Skitter's like, no, I want Dinah freed. Calvert seems to acquiesce and say, okay, well, how do you want to proceed? Do you want me to release her to her parents or what? Further putting Skitter off balance, as Wildbow writes here. She's like, oh, wow, I didn't think we'd get this far. And here we are.
Yeah, it's a shocker that he kind of caves so quickly. And I think because Skitter is so young, it's like what they call a queen's gambit, where in chess you give up your biggest piece on the board, your most powerful piece, arguably, because your opponent immediately thinks, oh, well, I won. There's nothing to stop me now. And it totally distracts them from what you might be doing with your other pieces. And I think by just kind of saying, all right, here it is on a silver platter,
Mm-hmm.
Skitter is even more caught off guard, and her defenses are brought down.
Should, oh gosh, I wonder if Tattletale, well, no, never mind. That might not be a good question to ask at this moment. Okay, so let's move on. I know I keep doing that to you, bro. I'm sorry, but my brain starts twirling around, and I start thinking about questions, and I'm trying to weigh the validity of the questions versus possible upcoming information. So I'm always going to try to err on the side of caution, I think. Anyway, Calvert makes an agreement, says, yeah, okay, fine. I'll release Dinah. Yeah. And offers to give the Undersiders a ride. And Skitter says, nah, she hops on Atlas, and Gru hops on Bentley with Bitch. They head on over to that location. Oh yeah, Tattletale, she goes to another location with Alec and Shatterbird. Right. So we're heading toward the end of the chapter. Everything's almost too good to believe. Dinah's there. Skitter goes over, takes her hand, and we think everything's going to be fine. And suddenly Skitter finds herself teleported to another location, and disaster ensues. Just bad things all the way around.
This part was a little weird for me. I mean, I understand. I never expected Calvert to go through with it, and I figured he'd have something going on. But this just seems kind of a weird way to do it. It seems like he could have, there's lots of other ways this could have gone and still got him to let him keep Dinah, basically. But to have her teleported and then containment foam, nobody's talking to her, and a gun goes off.
I think I can safely say this next portion of the arc will answer this for you. A couple of parts you may end up reading late into the night because you're not going to be able to stop. But yeah, Taylor tries to call him out after she realizes she's been betrayed, the inevitable betrayal. She calls her swarm that she has on her person, sends them out, says, what, no monologue? You're not going to explain yourself? And the response is the pull of a trigger, and boom. And that's the end of the end of this chapter, which takes
You're
us
killing
on.
me, Smalls. You're killing me.
I thought about you, bro. I thought about you when I was listening to this again. I'm like, oh, this is going to be killing him. All right. This moves us on into the final interlude of Arc 16, and it will be the final part of the story that we will cover in this episode. We find ourselves back inside back inside the birdcage with Marquis and Amelia. Just a pretty interesting look at life inside the birdcage, the politics of the arrangement, how Marquis is trying to juggle a lot of different things, keep them in the air, dealing with Amelia, trying to keep the rest of the parahuman cell block leaders, keep them at bay with the promise of her healing. And then you've got Lung staring at you, looking for any weakness. How do you like this story as it was laid out here?
It reminded me a little bit of those pirate stories where the captain captures a woman and is trying to protect her in a way while still being a pirate captain and
Yeah.
them still doing their thing. But all the other pirates are like, we don't just like protect women,
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Mm-hmm.
and there's always that, oh, who's going to take down the captain, and so it gave me that kind of vibe, which I like. I mean, it's an interesting twist on that whole prison dynamic, if you will. There's always going to be either somebody who is a hulking strongman type person who has a brain working for him to kind of do the strategy,
Mm-hmm.
or it'll be flipped where it's somebody like Big Figure from the Watchmen, a very diminutive person, but with a giant brain,
Oh
basically,
yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
and he'll have a bunch of horsepower around him to, he'll have all the bodyguards basically to enforce things. And so here you've got the two of them, and they've both got their pluses and minuses, but Marquis isn't without power of his own,
Yeah.
beyond his intellect. And Lung is new to the scene, and his modus operandi has been, we'll just take out people that don't fall in line.
Yeah.
But all these folks are pretty heavy hitters. That's why they're in the birdcage. So it's not like they're all going to just fold on him or bow down to him. So he's in a weird position as the new kid on the block, even though he's kind of been in charge before. So, but yeah, it's like Marquis trying to be, after being a horrible absentee parent, trying to be kind of a parent, and then Amelia having gone through almost an unimaginable trauma, and like, no, I don't even want to do that. And he's like, well, but
Right.
I can't let anybody know that she's not going to do it, or that she can't do it. So yeah, he's walking a very, very thin line here.
Yeah. You talk about his intellect. Yeah, I think anybody with a lesser intellect would not have been able to hold this situation together for as well as he did, keeping these, some of them are killers, keeping them off of his daughter while he tries to coax the use of her power out of her. She's had some trauma. She opens up to him a little bit about it later on in the interlude, but he's trying to parlay the promise of her power into more time to get her to cope. And he tries to parlay the promise of her power into a little more time to allow him to coax her to use it. I think I'm saying that. That's what I want to say.
I think that's a good way to characterize it. Yeah, it's just he's hoping that his brain is such that he's used to trying to solve puzzles, and
Mm-hmm.
he's kind of seeing this as another puzzle. I mean, he does lament the fact that he had broken people a couple times before, and he didn't really try very hard before saying, all right, they're beyond reclamation, I can't do anything for him. And he wishes he had tried harder, because it would have prepped him for this. He could have tried almost different psychological experiments, if you will, to try to help people, but he was trying to keep his power base consolidated, and he couldn't put a lot of energy into it anyway.
Yeah, and how could you know that eventually your daughter's going to end up here? So, I mean, he
Exactly.
dealt with the situation as it was
Right.
at that moment. Did you like the way that we, from Marquis's point of view, we get the detailed explanation of the situation in the bird cage, the physical outline of the cell block. We get the description of the other cell leaders who were coming to the parlay, while Marquis was holding court. It's not your standard prison, obviously, but using Marquis as a POV gave us a good insight to the structure, the layout, and the people involved there.
Yeah, and harking back to some of the questions that we had, it is kind of a pattern that Wildbow uses, and it makes a lot of sense in hindsight.
Mm-hmm.
You have somebody who has the best grasp of a situation, or at least what seems like a very solid grasp of the situation, as the person who's kind of laying it out for the reader. So, if we had had Lung in this position instead, it would have been like, oh, half of them were sheep and the other half were wannabe lions, and I just had to make sure that the lions weren't thinking they could take me down, and I could do with the sheep with what I wanted. And it would have been like, that doesn't really tell me anything. I mean, that's super two-dimensional and
Mm-hmm.
boring, you know. So by having more of a strategic mind as the narrator, then you get more of the nuance. And I particularly like the part where they mentioned that not all of the areas kind of had like a warlord or a war lady, somebody running of the block, because the blocks that do have a leader want cannon fodder from somewhere or want to have the sheep, if you
Mm-mm,
will.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so you don't want to, you've got to balance that resource too, as messed up as that sounds. But we are in prison, and these are not nice people, so the dynamics are going to be a little bit more blatantly messed up.
Right. So the other leaders of the cell block, of the other cell blocks, show up for this discussion, this meeting. We hit some interesting names: acid bath, galvanate, teacher, black kaze, plastic whinye, string theory, and crane, who were some of the leaders of the female side of the bird cage. And they come there to talk to Marquis about his daughter. And they're a little frustrated because they're expecting Marquis to make her power available for trade. You know, it's like, hey, are you holding her power for ransom? When are we going to get a display of this alleged power? Some of the people are a little concerned, think that he may be pulling some kind of a bluff against them. Everybody except for this Glastic Wynye character. Thoughts about her?
This is where things take a very interesting turn. And so, yeah, this person feels like she's in touch with the fairy, which for people who read fantasy, is sometimes called the fae, but it's basically the little people, you know, similar to the leprechauns or what have you. But, you know, they were all sorts of things were attributed to them. But basically, they were lived in a shadow realm that was kind of parallel to ours, and they could come across at certain times or in certain circumstances. But this character feels like she's in touch with them and connected to them, and you know, is provided uh, look into the future and power of prophecy through her association with them. So, yeah, she really is a different flavor from all the other parahumans we've run across.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really interesting. People probably get that after I, you know, went off on my little walk down fantasy memory lane. But
Let me read this one section when she comes to the fore. It says, Glastic Wynye shifted position, and Marquis wasn't the only one to give her his full attention. What he could see of her beneath her blackened tatters of her prison sweats turned shroud suggested she was barely a teenager, but that was more due to her power than anything. She'd been one of the first prisoners in the bird cage, and he suspected she would be one well after he died. Not that her megalomaniacal delusion was true, rather it was the fact that nobody dared pick a fight with her. That last sentence says a lot, given the people who are inside the Bauman Parahuman jail.
yeah, there's a lot of firepower and people that can do all sorts of things here. But here's this person who just has this charisma almost. There's just this power that emanates from her. And, you know, whether you believe it or not, whether it's delusional or not.
There's no denying the power.
Exactly. Yeah. And people are just like, no, that I'm not going there.
Mm-hmm.
That's just too messed up, you know. So.
Yeah, there's one other one I want to read to make sure that you hold on to this one. It says, this is Glastic Wynye talking, says, your daughter too. Your fairy is kin to the one that sleeps inside the girl. I have no doubt this Amelia is a healer, but that's only a facet of her true strength. I have decided I will not bargain with you, Marquis. So why don't you stick a pin in that line?
Okay.
I think not immediately, but sometime in a not too distant future, arcs down the road, you're going to have an aha moment about that. So Glastic Wynye makes a few more statements and reaches out to shake hands with Amelia. Amelia curtsies, and she does that back in response. Freaks freaks Marquis out, and he manages to keep it under control, under wraps. Oh, Marquis feels it when he breaks his bones. Ouch.
Yeah. Ugh. That's just grim. Yeah.
And I mean, oh,
And it
jeez.
hurts really bad, it sounds
Right.
like. And he's just taught himself to hide his reaction.
Mm-hmm. I
Dang.
think I
No
think that
thanks.
I think Wildbow just threw that in there to make me squirm. Ugh, the thought of, because you think back to that fight that he had with the then Brockton Bay Brigade, and how he was snapping off various bones during that fight and puncturing and burrowing through the floor and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
another limitation, well, it's not even a limitation, but an acknowledgement that Cape's power does not come without
Mm.
some kind of thing that makes it hard to deal with. It's not easy using.
Yeah. It does. So it's something that keeps them self-contained, if you will, so that they don't because otherwise they could easily, some of these could be pretty overpowered. But when, yeah, there's these things that are debilitating, then that kind of balances it out.
Yeah. After Glastic Wynye speaks, and E.F. Hutton, and when he speaks, everyone listens. Anyway, so people accept the fact that Amelia is, in fact, got some kind of healing power. I did like and I know I'm not doing it justice because we're just rolling through this interlude, but the entire interlude, Marquis is trying to maneuver the politics to his best advantage, and he seizes upon the situation once Glastic Wynye presents that to him, and other people accept the fact that yes, this girl is a healer, and Marquis is like, aha, so this plays into our hands, and now I can improve my bargaining position for the promised use of Amelia's power.
Yeah, they all seem to be okay with it. I mean, the one guy points out that, hey, I've got somebody who does teeth, and I don't want you to step on his toes and be taking business from him and from me. But they all seem to be at least agreeable that what Marquis is doing is going to work in everybody's favor in general. So
as after the meeting, well, pardon me, as the meeting begins to head toward the end, and Amelia comes out of her shell a little bit. I know we skipped over the fact that she's rightfully traumatized being in this prison, and Marquis is, as we said, trying to get her to come out of her shell. And she does open up a little bit in the form of asking a question of everyone. And Teacher, this one Cape called Teacher, replies. Her question had to do with why doesn't anybody try to escape from this place? And the discussion comes down to the possibility, the running theory is that the birdcage is actually a facility due to size warping technology is no bigger than a football hidden inside the mountain, inside a mountain, or encased in lead. Did you find that theory a little freaky?
Yeah, that was a total twist. I hadn't thought of that, but I mean, that could definitely be a possibility. I mean, we've seen warping of space, and so
Vista.
yeah, exactly. And so why not? And that would make it a lot easier. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's all sorts of ways you could trap a football in something that would make it impossible to get out of, as opposed to a whole giant prison that's going to have to be removing a huge chunk of something. So, yeah, it's
An interesting proposition there.
definitely, yeah.
After the meeting breaks up and they're heading back to their rooms, Amelia and Marquis are talking, and he tries to explain Glastic Wynye's shtick, and Amelia says, well, that's, I saw her physiology when I shook her hand, and she gleaned something from there. And it sounds like it's pretty important to the fact that she wishes that she could get the information to someone. Marquis says, well, if you think it's that important, you can go to your room, just speak it out loud. Dragon monitors and records everything. And if it's worthwhile, she'll know what to do with it. Also, Marquis has a suggestion for how she can hold on to the memory of Glory Girl. Good. Why don't you tackle those two items there?
Well, yeah, the first one I think I'm going to put off to the end here, but the second
Okay.
one, the tattoo idea, I think is really cool. And
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to imagine what the tattoo could be like if a parahuman's doing the tattooing. So, I don't know if you've watched The Peripheral on Prime,
Not
but
yet. Yeah.
one of the characters on there has animated tattoos that can move around and change shape on them and that kind of thing. And there's a few instances of that in different stories. And so, you wonder how much a parahuman could put into a tattoo. If when Amelia was sad, could the tattoo look sad, for instance, or something?
Sure.
So that's cool to think about what the possibilities are there. But I think it's a great idea that Marquis had to try to memorialize. Yeah, you don't want to forget the person, but you do have to move on from the event, no matter how horrible it is. If you're going to live a life, you can't stay stuck in the past.
Right.
And so I think this is it's a great way for him to try to help her start climbing out of this hole.
And then the thing about Amelia going to her room and sharing this information with Dragon, the attempt. Several things happen. She speaks it. The house program takes the information, sends it through several different routers, compartmentalizes it appropriately. The Seamerg changes course, and something happens. The data gets corrupted and shunted off to another location. Do your programmer analysis of that whole situation.
Well, first off, even currently now in correctional facilities, all calls are monitored, all visitation is monitored, and oftentimes inmates come up with codes or ways of doing things, but they're already using AI to try to crack that stuff because, for a long time it was all manual, people going through
Mm,
listening to those calls, transcribing them manually, and then trying to decide if it was something actionable. Because, as they show in a lot of prison movies or movies where prisons factor in, the people who are incarcerated are the head of the gang or whatever, and they're still running the gang, even though they're inside because they're sending messages. And so, it totally makes sense that Dragon would have on steroids, basically, listening for keywords, flagging things, listening to everything. Every corner of the place is bugged. There's just no way to not. And so solving crimes that were unsolvable because somebody let something slip, whatever. But yeah, something happened between the lady from Fairy and Amelia. When they shook hands, Amelia hesitated and then curtsied.
mm-hmm.
And then the fairy lady curtsied back. And so they definitely had a deeper connection there. And even though Amelia is not using her power, something clicked there and she's got to get this out. And so she takes Marquis's advice and she's doing the praying. It gets picked up, it gets manipulated by Dragon, parsed, everything's and it's determined, all right, yeah, we should get this out there. But Seamerg doesn't want it to get out.
Mm-hmm.
So that combined with what Amelia said got me thinking about things you and I had talked about. Well, where did the Endbringers come from and how do they factor into this?
Okay.
And then got me thinking about trigger events and trigger vision and these possible beings that are doing things and causing things to happen. And even factored in a little bit with Pago, and how it's almost like she has some kind of imperative to keep a balance or to make sure stuff doesn't get out of balance. And so got me thinking, well, what if the things that are there that are causing the trigger events are actually things? It's not a change in the person, but it's some additional entity. And what this one parahuman is perceiving as fairy are actually these beings, these
Okay.
extraterrestrial beings. And Amelia was able to see that, oh wait, no, there's something else there that's not human, and I need to let people know that this is what's going on. But it seems like maybe a check to the and balance to the system that these extraterrestrial beings have put in place are the end bringers.
Okay.
And that's what's keeping things from getting out of hand, that because what's to stop? People are going to want to live, whether they're parahumans or not. Some of them are evil and they're trying to take out bunches of people, but they've got to realize if they take everybody out, then where's the fun in that? You've got to have people around. But it seems like more and more people are triggering, and people are figuring out how to cause trigger events. And so maybe the endbringers are a way to try to keep that,
To cull the herd?
exactly. They sweep some of the pieces off the board periodically, oh, it's getting too wild out there. All right, take out 50% of this group, And Seamerg doesn't want people to know that Amelia's got some insight. And so it blocks the transmission. It garbles the transmission, and the house program sends it off. The receiver gets a garbled thing and says, well, I don't know what this is, but I'll store it away, but it doesn't seem anything actionable. And life goes on.
That is a really interesting supposition. I have no plan to indicate to you whether you're right or not.
Of course you can. Of course you can. Oh,
but
man.
that's fascinating, and I have no doubt that some of the listeners are going to be intrigued by your thought process there. So anyway, yeah, the comments should be real interesting after this episode, I think.
Well, that's what we're here for, right? It's just
you bet.
Be provocative.
That takes us to the end of the interlude. Any final thoughts there, bud?
Again, the only one is just continuing amazement at, like you said earlier, Taylor being Taylor. How no matter what events throw curveballs at her, she's still trying to be a villain with a really strong moral compass, if you will. Marquis kind of comments on that and says, I'm not good in any sense of the word. I do have some codes that I abide by, but I'm not good.
Right.
But Taylor is way beyond that. She is trying to be good, but just with some villainous tendencies, because that's how it's worked out. And yeah, Wildbow continues to walk that fine line and make it believable. And so I think that's really cool.
Excellent. All right, everyone, that'll do it for part 3. In part 4, we'll review the remaining chapters of this arc, and Andy will make his selection for key character of the arc at that time. So we hope you'll return for that. And we'll be signing off for now. Thanks for being here with us each episode. We really appreciate the questions. Please keep them coming. And until next time, take care.
And I'm just going to make a disclaimer right now. If I happen to say some things that are particularly prophetic, it's not because I am totally sick of these cliffhangers at the end of these sections and I have illegally read ahead. That's definitely not, that couldn't be what happened.
No.
But no, all seriousness, I'm not going to read ahead. As I said, I'm a pretty goody two shoes. I follow the rules, but man, these cliffhangers are killing me. But appreciate you guys, all gals, listening in and sending in your comments. And we look forward to create another podcast for you next time and wrapping up this arc. Thanks for joining us in this podcast. We hope you'll like, comment, and subscribe. If not, thanks for stopping by anyway, and we'll hope you'll return. Music is by the band YYNOT from their self-titled debut CD. You can find more in the link down below. Catch you later.